Good evening, and welcome back to Spooky Town Tales, episode 15. Tonight, we are talking about vampires. It is me, Morgan, or, for the sake of it being more appropriate for the theme of the episode, Lady Morgana. And joining me in the spooky seats is Count
Jim Bob. Good evening.
Welcome, Jimmy.
Thanks.
So we're back for, it's not going to be a very long episode this week because we have had Chaos Week again.
Round
4,
7, 8.
I don't know. But we had a few messages and we were missed, and you know what? We missed doing it as well.
Yes, true.
It is one of our favourite things to do in the week. We look forward to it. Putting together another spooky episode for you and recording it and bringing it to you is one of my little highlights.
Yeah.
I'm rambling.
Mine too. Even though I'm not a great deal of use, I thoroughly enjoy hanging out.
So I've scrounged together an episode on vampires because I know if you're like me, vampires have been a pretty integral part, well, for most people. If you enjoy spooky or dark things, generally, well, most of our culture in that genre is saturated with imagery of these dark beings.
Yes.
The undead.
They'll crop its weary head every now and again.
It's weary head. They're everywhere. And I have done some digging to see where the hell the whole idea of a vampire came from for you this evening.
Ooh.
And I tell you what, it does not match Hollywood's picture of it does not match at all. And a lot of it makes so much sense as to how people really truly believed in these creatures of the night.
Yeah.
But how amazingly romanticized Hollywood has made them.
Made it look like a good thing.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
Completely different.
Oh, yeah, just made it so much prettier than what was going on in the Dark Ages when it was, when people had truly believed that these creatures were out there. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to go into some history. I've got a couple of cases, very weird cases of so-called vampire encounters through history that people have genuinely thought. And, admittedly, they are a bit odd. But then you pay into that, you've got to sort of take into account when it was going on and the ignorance is what gets me. Then I'm going to go into what it was actually happening that was making people think these people were vampires. So I've got a scientific explanation, a medical explanation for what was going on.
You done your research?
I've done my research, even though it's been a busy week. So if I sound like I'm falling asleep, it's probably because I am.
Yep.
But I'm going to push through and try and get this done.
So I'll shake you.
Yes. So are you comfortable? Are you wearing a cloak? You should be tonight whilst listening to the vampire episode. Have you got a drink? Preferably blood. No, please don't drink blood.
It's gross.
It's gross. Red wine will do. Symbolic. Prepare to be spooked. I'm really sad because I've just paused the recording to get my shit together and Jimmy did the best joke. So there I was, and I was counting like the order of what I'm going to read first. I'm going to try and replicate it. And I said, 1. There you go. Even on Sesame Street, we have count, the count. The count. And my favourite count, part of the count song, you know what it is, my favourite number.
Comes after 10
Actually,
and before 12.
There's 2, because 7 is good. But then he goes on to say 11. It's so good. Anyway, we'll get back to grown-up stuff. Can you tell we have young children? Yeah, you can. So, the thought to start off this very, popular subject, I would ask you about, when you hear the word vampire, what image of vampire comes into your head? Like, what do you think? What do you see?
The standard black cloak, fangs.
With the red lining.
With the red lining, because he's a classy gent.
Yes, he's a seductive.
Yeah, all the typical stuff.
But is there a specific vampire from a film, although you haven't seen that many?
No, not as many as you.
Is there one that stands out when you think vampire? Like, that's what I picture.
I can't remember what the movie is, but I do recall there was an old movie that's just the epitome of Count Dracula, and I've gone blank. I can't remember what the movie was.
Was it Dracula?
No.
The one
Thank
you for making me sound like a complete spasmoid. Jimmy
This guy's an ass.
When I met Jimmy, he'd not seen many. He'd not really.
Not television. We hadn't
Well,
seen
no,
the television.
what's this box with the pictures? I was a mega film buff and still am. Mm-hmm. So I introduced him to all the old, like Plan 9 from Outer Space, Dracula with Bela Lugosi, Nosferatu. See, Nosferatu used to be what I pictured as vampire. Then Bela Lugosi in Dracula. And then the 80s hit. Well, because I was back living in the 60s, apparently. No, but what I used to picture, because I'd only seen, like, I'd seen little snippets of the old Dracula movies when I was very little. And it was Fright Night for me. Oh. The vampire from Fright Night, which is just pure, terrifying, red eyes, blood-covered nails, huge fangs. Yeah. Appears at the window. Fright Night.
Fair enough.
That's how And then, of course, now there are so many. You've got your glittery Twilight vampires that glitter in the sun.
Hotel
Transylvania. Maybe Wavy. You've got True Blood. And the common theme in all of them is they're all very attractive and healthy. Yeah. And strong. Yeah. That's like...
Too strong.
Yeah. Superhuman strength. Very sexy. And, to just smack the shit out of that whole ideology, which it's
if you go into the roots of what it is.
Let's think about what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
They're dead people who've come back to life to drain the life force out of someone else. Yeah. So, back in the oldie days, we're going to start off some history here. Yeah. There were cases that basically formed the Hollywood idea of what a vampire was. Yeah. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to keep going back to where it actually started. Oh, okay. But the whole Hollywood view actually came from the literature of the time.
Oh, okay.
So Bram Stoker. And then you've got, prior to that, the reason that was based on the character Vlad Dracul, or Vlad the Impaler.
Right. As
well as other little encounters, one of which I'll read you tonight, which this author had heard and then developed into the image of Count Dracula. So Vlad Dracul was, he was basically the ruler of Wallachia in Romania, Transylvania, in the 1440s. I think it was between the 1440s and the 1470s. It was described to have repulsive sexiness
Not the sort of description you want.
Yeah, it was like he was powerful, but there was something about him. He wasn't like uber attractive, but there was something about maybe his assertiveness, but a very scary man with very dead eyes. And there is a portrait, if you look him up, of what Vlad the Impaler, as he came to be known, what he actually looked like.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was not, pardon the pun, he was no oil painting, but how funny is that? How ironic that the picture I'm talking about is indeed an oil painting. But he, so basically he, I'm taking over the dad jokes.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, he was actually, like, historically, you know, when I think of Vlad the Impaler, from what I've heard, he was just this horrendous monster. But he was considered in Transylvania to be a national hero.
Really?
Yeah. Because at the time, back in the oldie days, you know, it's pretty brutal, dark ages, horrible.
Yeah. Lots of
I'm going to
stuff
kill
happening.
you, and we don't like you, so we're going to kill we're going to just raid your village and kill everybody.
Basically
That was standard. That was standard practice. That's how the government worked.
Yep.
So, and you had all your crossbreeding and your, you know, you've got to, you crossbreed, like, you know, inbreeding, crossbreeding, where you're keeping it in the family. So certain families had to be the second son or the first son or whatever would take over regardless of how competent they were or what mental disorders they had. They would then rule the country, and there was anyway. So they called it, I think it's the Voivode of Wallachia was the name of the title.
All right.
So he was actually Vladimir III. So Vlad the Impaler was the third Vlad Dracul.
Yeah.
So he was Vlad the Third. He had an older brother called Vlad. His father was called Vlad, and there was a younger brother below Vlad the Third. So below Vlad the Impaler.
What was his name?
I don't know.
Was it Vlad? Because
it wasn't Vlad.
That is like
very confusing.
No effort put in naming children.
I'm not even joking. His cousin was Vladislav. Okay. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Can't make this up.
Yeah.
So basically, during his time, Vlad III was Voivode of Wallachia 3 times.
Yeah.
But initially, the father obviously was in position to take the throne, or was in power.
Yeah.
The eldest son, his older brother Vlad, was supposed to take over.
Yeah.
But during the Ottoman Empire, they took control of Wallachia. In 1442. They'd taken the 2 younger brothers hostage. So Vlad III and his younger brother were taken hostage, so they couldn't claim ownership over the throne, and the father and the older brother were murdered.
Right.
So basically,
that's how you wipe it out.
You wipe it out. The people who are entitled to the throne are gone. The heir is gone.
Yeah.
The current Voivode is dead.
Yeah.
The others are out of the
Put in your
picture
new
because
one.
we've got them held hostage. They're not coming forward to claim the throne. We can take over.
Yeah.
So that happened. So that was pretty brutal. So I can see why he probably had a few issues.
Yeah.
Then, because of the absence of Vlad and his younger brother, his second cousin, Vladislav II, became the Voivode. And he was a bit of a shithead. So basically, Vlad the Impaler, we'll just call him.
Yeah. Yep.
He ended up sort of protesting against the Voivode, his cousin.
Yeah. Yep.
And overthrew and invaded, and there was a lot of carnage.
Yeah.
And then he, as they call it, he purged Wallachia's borders.
Oh.
And in doing that, basically, he went into all the villages and murdered all the Transylvanian Saxons that were in the area at the time, and plundered the villages, capturing everybody, and his trademark was he impaled them on spikes.
Great.
That was his, like, I am purging this village and I'm taking control back for Transylvania. I don't even know if that's a Romanian accent. It was a go. I had a go.
You've done good.
So there's your history of Vlad the Impaler. A bit of history for you. If it was confusing, I'm sorry.
No, it makes
They were all
sense.
called Vlad. It's tricky. But that's Vlad the Impaler. So it was actually, pretty gross that he impaled. And there is a lot more to him. So this is just a basic history. I know he did lots of dreadful things. And the bloodlust didn't stop after that.
Yeah.
There were various other things. Like after he got control of Wallachia. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. There were several other things he did just for a bit of fun.
Yeah, just
to take. I want that bit now. Let's go murder all of them. Yeah. He was bloodthirsty, that's for sure.
Yep.
He did end up dying in 1448, having left quite a legacy of murder and
And so well known.
Yeah, but the basically the whole feeling behind him was he was strangely persuasive and alluring.
Right.
And hence people sort of tie him in with the devil and this sort of thing. He just seemed to have this ability to influence and
the essence about him.
Yeah, and his power and his pure confidence of this is what we're doing. No qualms whatsoever with mass murder. And so that is where Dracula came from. He's based on this particular historical figure. So moving back, we'll move forward a little bit, and we'll just talk basically about what became because of these trademarks.
Mm-hmm.
So the teeth are considered a phallic symbol as well.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty, long, sharp penetration, all that sort of thing. There's always a sexual element to popular.
Mm-hmm. Like you were saying
before. There's it's a sexual element to the modern day vampire. Their ability to hypnotise you or take control of your mind.
Yeah.
That's another common denominator. Obviously, drinking of blood, long fingernails, clean, white, sharp teeth. The teeth are always spotlessly clean in the movies.
Yeah.
Pale skin, obviously, because they only come out at night.
Yeah.
And they always fear everything holy and religious.
Yes.
That's another tied in with the popular culture image. Now, all of these factors, bearing in mind, have come from folklore.
Yes.
So it's been turned into a beautiful image of you've got your Brad Pitt, An Interview with a Vampire. You've got your what's his name? Stuart Townsend, even in Queen of the Damned, very beautiful.
Yeah.
All the modern day vampires are very attractive, very alluring. Never mention stink.
No.
I mean, the first thing I think of undead is smell.
Of course.
And that's where I'm going to take you on a very gross historical journey to describe to you where the folklore began.
Right.
So straight off the bat, I'm going to just hit you with it. Vampires were misunderstood diseases.
Makes sense.
People didn't understand that germs and infections could be spread from person to person back in the old days.
Yeah.
So basically, every single sort of outbreak of vampire cases or incidences were always during an outbreak of tuberculosis or the plague. It always coincided.
Yeah.
And basically, when you look back and everything I've read, the experts have said it's basically ignorance people and superstition and people not realising because this person died and they were in your house and they had an infectious disease, that is why once they died, the rest of the family are dying because they've caught the disease. They didn't understand that it was something you could catch.
Yeah.
They believed it was a curse.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Makes
sense. So this is what basically the roots of where the vampire folklore started.
Yeah.
It was from the spread of very bad diseases like the plague and tuberculosis, or they used to call it consumption. Another symptom of consumption, coughing up blood.
Yeah, all right.
So that ties into it.
Absolutely.
Also, it's basically, that was that was where it began, was just the lack of knowledge about disease.
Yeah.
And not knowing that if I am in
Get
contact with someone who's dying of this illness, I'm going to get it and I'm going to die too.
Yeah.
So they would, there'd be whole towns where masses of people would all die at once. They'd be convinced there was someone coming, because a lot of these diseases, you'd get so lethargic and drained, you couldn't move. People were convinced there was someone sucking the life from them.
Makes sense.
That's where it started. People hallucinated.
Yeah, yep.
People just were superstitious in general.
At the best of times.
So they'd think, it's him. He's come back. He died. Now he's come back. He's taking my life force.
Yep.
So it all coincides. Now, it doesn't just stop there. Now, from everything I've read, people were messed up in the old days. Like, when you died and were buried, they didn't leave you buried.
Ooh,
They dug you up all the time. Like, people dug dead people up all the time when it came to this sort of thing. Concern of when people started dying in these towns, I'm not even joking, they would dig up the corpse to see what they've been doing. Check if they've been out of the grave. Check if they've been attacking people. We'll just dig him up and just check. Okay.
Come on, guys.
Now, another huge, huge contributing factor to the theory and the myth of a vampire. When a body decays, another thing they were completely ignorant about.
Yeah.
Your skin retracts.
Yeah.
It withers.
Yep.
Revealing your teeth look larger because your skin retracts.
Yeah.
Your teeth become more visible. Your nails look longer because that's withering. It's decomposing. Yeah. So your nail bed becomes longer and it looks as though you've got longer nails.
Yeah.
You look more skeletal and scary. Yeah. There's another thing that happens to your body. Your organs. They break down.
Yeah.
And a dark purple fluid leaks from the mouth and the nose.
Right.
But as it dries, it looks like dried blood. So when they crack open these coffins, they'd look like the lips would be gone.
Yeah.
There'd be all these teeth exposed that would be covered in a blood-like substance.
Yeah.
That is how it started. That coinciding with multiple deaths in the villages from a plague or whatever, tuberculosis, whatever the disease was. Oh my God, he's got out his grave. He's been biting people and sucking their blood and their life force.
Yeah.
That's how vampires came about.
Yeah. Over-curious people.
No, just
suspicious of weirdness.
So during these hysterical phases, they would dig up pretty much anyone they were suspicious could be the cause, remove the heart, and burn it.
Oh my God.
Yep. They would also ram stakes, obviously, but they used I think it was called white thorn.
Okay.
Was the one that they would use most often during these early days.
Yeah.
They would ram them through the corpse. Man. Sometimes they'd cut head off, all kinds of things. But generally it was the heart. They just decided that must be it. So we're going to take that out, we're going to burn it. That's going to solve the problem. Did it? No. Now this it gets weirder, okay?
You can't get too much weird.
It gets weirder. So this is how they were just going to try anything.
Yeah.
Another cure, they thought, was to remove the heart of the corpse of this person they believed was the cause of the start of it all.
Yeah.
You would burn it to ash, crumble it up, and then feed it to the ailed person, under the suspicion that for some reason their essence would go back to them.
Their life force back that the vampire took from.
Yes, but effectively you're giving a rotten disease
to them.
Yes.
Helping, some would say.
And they would always die.
Oh my God.
They believed that it meant this wasn't so much the cure, it was the prevention from them becoming vampires. Oh. They would give them the heart of the original vampire in a little drink or something. So I'm not making this up. This is what people actually did because they truly believed it wasn't the plague.
Yeah.
It was a supernatural thing. They were coming out at night and they would try,
It's incredible.
Yeah.
They needed televisions back then or something.
You just needed goddamn education. This is why you got to stay in school, kids. Stay in school. Now, along the lines of this weird, yeah, it's bad. So, in Venice, so this wasn't just one area. This was like it was common in most cultures because obviously
disease was prevalent.
Disease was and it coincided. People just assumed
there's
something more going on here.
Yep.
So in Venice, they would, whenever there were outbreaks of the plague, they would bury the dead with a brick in their mouth.
Okay.
To prevent them from, being able to bite people. That's how they honestly believed. Now, they called them strega, which it was basically they'd put the brick in to prevent them coming back as a vampire or a witch.
Oh. Wow.
Now, let's take a little trip across to Germany, where they call them Nachzinas. Nachzina, someone correct me if I'm wrong, which translates to after devourers.
Oh, nice.
I don't like this one. This is really gross. But these guys didn't leave the graves. They would chew on their burial shrouds.
Oh.
Again, it's to do with the purge of the fluids.
Yes. Yep.
It would cause the shrouds to sag and tear.
Yep.
And it would give the illusion that it's been chewed by the corpse. But they would dig up bodies and go, this one's an after chewer, this one's an after devourer, this one's a Nachzina.
Wow.
So they believed that they caused problems above ground, but were most active during plague outbreaks. And there's a little theology, a Protestant theologian. Sorry, guys. He wrote a little passage on the chewing dead. He accused the Nachzina of harming their surviving family members through the occult and advised people to stuff the mouth with soil or a stone.
Wow.
So it was actually like religious groups who were advising townsfolk. So the people that, they looked up to, because the church was considered to be, nowadays we know better, but they were advising people to bury the dead with stones and soil in the mouth because they honestly believed that they were chewing on their robes, but they're also just causing grief for the families.
Wow.
Yeah, by the 18th century, though, Pope Benedict, I think it was the 14th? 18th century? Anyway, Pope Benedict came out with a statement that it was a fallacious fictions of human fantasy and that you need to cut it out. So basically, he nipped it in the bud. He's like, enough's enough.
Yeah.
It's disease. So, but it carried on, obviously. It kept going. Romania and New England, the anti-vampire trick was that you would, they were the ones mainly to cut the heart out of and burn to ashes and then feed to sick people.
Yeah.
So both New England and Romania practiced this as an anti-vampire prevention. Still to this day, there are people who are claiming they're vampires, and we even have a young. Well, I don't know how young she is now. There is a woman in Australia who claims she's a vampire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's a bit of a nutbar. She drinks her boyfriend's blood regularly. Wow. Her name's Georgina. Such a vampire name.
It is.
You can look her up. She believes that she's a vampire. She's always enjoyed the taste of blood, and she said she never got a high quite like off drinking someone else's blood.
Oh.
And when she was a kid, she'd drink the blood from her cuts. And that's how she works. It's such a high school thing, but she's just not let it go. But apparently she does. Apparently she does regularly drink quite vast amounts.
Wow.
I wonder what that does for you. Like, I wonder if health-wise it's it's got to have some kind of bad effects on you. I don't know. Any doctors out there that might be able to answer this one for me?
Absolutely.
And in the 1960s, Sean Manchester, who was president of the British Occult Society... So no vested interest in this at all. No. He claimed that a vampire was causing people to see strange things in the Highgate Cemetery.
Whoa.
The newspapers covered the story, but a lot of people had said they had seen a tall figure with burning eyes and other spectral things floating above the cemetery.
Oh.
So that became, there was a little bit of a hysteria that there was a vampire
Yeah.
back then. I mean, cemetery. And you got your popular culture feeding into that. So I'm going to read you now some very interesting cases of supposed vampires throughout history. So, again, you can see why people got
Caught up
in it.
Yep.
Because there were things that happened where you could go, they wouldn't have known any better.
Yeah, with no knowledge, it makes sense.
But we'll start way back. We'll start way, way, way back. We'll go back to the early days of man, the biblical days.
Whoa.
Lilith. Hebrew.
Lilith.
Supposedly Adam's first wife.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Lilith, I have.
Oh.
But there was a Lilith in True Blood as well. They've even featured her, and they've even...
Wow.
Most vampire
Drag
trilogies or whatever will bring up Lilith.
Oh, okay.
She left Adam because she would not be subservient to him. And then in history became regarded as a demon succubus who rapes men and sucks the blood of infants. She's claimed to be able to shapeshift and have talons for feet. But she's also a barren woman who eats children out of jealousy. So the way I read this is that she's an example created by a man to say, if you don't do what your husband says, you're a hag who's a succubus who is going to be barren and eat children out of jealousy. Yeah. It's just women hating, really. Yeah. That's how I view the story of Lilith.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in Ireland, they had a vampire called Camilla, who was a lesbian. Right. And that comes from a literature. So this isn't so much that it was believed she was real, but there was a very influential vampire from Irish literature, Irish literature, from a book, who would prey only on young, beautiful women, and she was a woman herself. So it's quite racy. Yeah. And so that's another famous historical vampire. That's Ireland's vampire.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And then we have Iran have one called Lamashtu, which is more of a cryptid, and she preys on newborn babies. Oh. So I didn't find out much about her, but that's another one. Yeah. In Australia, we have Yaramar Yahoo, which I talked about in the Aussie Cryptids episode, which is that awfully scarifying new word.
That's a good one.
Little red man that jumps down from the top of fig trees with his sucky fingers and sucks your blood with his tentacles.
Octopus fingers.
His octopus fingers. And then he swallows you and then he spits you back out, but you're still alive.
But then you become one.
But then you turn into a little Yaramar Yahoo. So that's our one. Now, I'm going to read you some pretty weird ones now. So now we've touched on some historical instances of supposed... Hang on, they're all women.
The Australian ones? Huh?
No, all the old ones were women. Were women who... Yeah. I just realised that. Sorry, just had an epiphany. Okay, we're going to jump forward to the 1700s. So far forward. Look out. Serbia, 1725. Wow, my neck. 1775, a bloke called Peter.
Peter the vampire.
I believe he was a farmhand. No, 3 days after he passed away, his son claimed that he appeared at the house at the door asking for food. Oh. He fed him and he left. The following night he returned, but the son refused to feed him. The next morning, the son was found dead. Oh. 9 more villagers died after that. All complained of feeling exhausted and had lost large amounts of blood. All dreamt of being visited by Peter. So they exhumed his corpse and found his body perfectly preserved and his mouth was covered in blood. Mm. So that's pretty weird. That's one instance. That was in the 1700s. Yeah, yep. Then again, what time of year I wonder what time of year was he buried? Would that have something to do with the slow decomposition of his body? Because again, people didn't have the knowledge of how bodies decompose back then.
And like you said before, the blood on the mouth
Could have
been the same as always. Yep.
Yeah. So this next one was another farm hand or herdsman, and he supposedly had returned home, so back to his hometown after he had died, and people saw him walking down the main street, and he was trying to call out to people he recognised, and everyone was just like, "What? No, you're not alive. You're gone." Then he was gone, obviously probably feeling a bit hurt feelings.
Yeah.
They exhumed his body and they staked it with whitethorn stakes.
Right.
But then he returned again in a horrifying state. Apparently he scared people to death.
Oh.
Like people dropped dead in fear, and also suffocated people.
Oh.
Apparently he laughed during these attacks. So again, they got his body out of the grave and pierced it with more whitethorn stakes. Then they burnt it. And as they burnt it, apparently they could hear him screaming.
Wow. Curious.
I have a few theories about this particular one.
Yeah.
Was it the same guy? Were they just digging up this other guy that had died and just thinking it was him?
If he came back the second time in a worse state.
Maybe he went off, maybe this other guy who looks like him, maybe it was his brother or something, went off and got tanked and fell down a hill or something, then came back. Like, it's not like they... Or did they have his body?
Well,
Oh, yeah, they did. They did. The second time he came back.
Yeah.
Apparently he was sleeping and they gave his body to the executioner.
Whoa. Okay.
So I think it was a different man.
More than likely.
I think it was a different man who came and started maniacally killing people, and then they just staked him and burnt him. I don't think, because they didn't exhume the body the second time. It was a different person.
Interesting.
That's what I think. Anyway, I'm so glad I don't live in those.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
That one doesn't make sense. This next one's really weird, though. Really, really weird. So this one, having watched Dracula,
Yes.
the original's the best. Bela Lugosi, you just can't beat him. This one very much so has... You can see this story was influential
Yeah.
in that book. So this was The Phantom of Grockling Grange. The Fisher family owned this particular grange, but then the Crane family rented the estate in Spring.
Mm-hmm.
Magnificent
Yep.
estate. Had a churchyard. Lovely place.
Pretty spot.
Apparently it was just magnificent. One evening, the family was settling in for the evening. Mrs. Crane lit a candle in the window and noticed 2 points of light moving around the bottom of the garden through the cemetery in the churchyard. Curiosity turned to fear, so she locked the windows and bolted the door, then went to bed, just pretending nothing had happened. Just thought, I'm getting carried away.
Okay.
It was nothing. I'm being silly. She awoke to rustling outside her window, rolled over to see what it was, and realised the 2 lights she'd seen were actually a pair of eyes, and they were now attached to a person standing in her room. She tried to scream, but then this figure stepped to the bed, pulled her back as if to give her a kiss. She said there was the brothers said there was an overwhelming stench of mould and decay as they got towards her door because they could hear her screaming.
Mm-hmm.
They raced in and saw the sister on the bed with blood pumping from her neck. One brother caught a glimpse of the shadow flittering across the churchyard.
Whoa.
So the poor sister, in an absolute state, was shipped off to Switzerland, and the brothers swore vengeance to find what this thing was. that had bitten the sister. They managed to save the sister.
Yeah.
Quite deep lacerations on the neck, 2 bite holes.
Whoa.
From whatever this thing was. So they planned to trap whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they got the whole town involved. The whole town gathered to hunt this creature. They found a crypt that was full of smashed coffins and gnawed bones. There was one coffin that was intact and standing upright. When they opened it, there was a mouldy, clothed corpse. The eyes were lifeless, unlike what they'd been the night before. So they grabbed the coffin out and they set fire to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they believed that's what had attacked the sister.
Wow.
Because the rest of it was, there was no other, there was this other corpse that was intact, but no one had been buried there for a long time. It shouldn't have been like that. So that is a very popular legend.
Yeah.
That has obviously
good inspiration.
It's been developed into.
Yeah.
You can totally hear.
Yeah.
When I was reading about it, I was like, "Oh my god, that's totally where Mary Shelley, not Mary Shelley, I said Bram Stoker. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Bram Stoker did Dracula. Oh, I feel so stupid this evening.
Oh, come on, you're doing well.
So here's another weird one, where they just scares me how ignorant people were.
Yeah.
In 1582, in Soleja, a man called Canisius was fatally injured by a horse. So before he passed away, so it took him a few days to die, he was said he was seeing ghostly visions and he felt like he was on fire. When he died, a black cat jumped on his bed. Having been buried in a crypt, people claim to have been visited by the dead man. Apparently, when he was around, he had smelly, cold breath. So this is more like it. This is what I would expect of him. In late July, so several people had said he'd come to the door and tried to speak with them and had stunk.
Oh,
So in July, they exhumed his body and found that his flesh was soft, his joints were limber, and his blood, when they pricked his arm, came out clean and fresh.
Ooh.
So they burned the body and then crushed it into ashes. That was the solution.
That's pretty creepy.
Yeah, that one was a bit creepy. But, I mean...
Again.
Could have been a ghost, if people believe in ghosts. Doesn't necessarily mean that he was a vampire. He didn't attack anyone or bite anyone. He was smelly, but... it was a smelly ghost. But you just got to wonder, like, that's the go-to. It's a vampire!
Yeah. No, that's interesting, that one.
But, again, let's go back to ignorance.
Yeah.
Medical ignorance. People, there were precautions. They did, in several parts of the world, have to put bells attached to strings into coffins because it was quite regular. It did happen where people were buried alive.
Yeah.
They'd assume they were dead, they'd bury them. When you think about coma, people go into comas.
Just being knocked out.
Or being... Some people, if they've had a serious accident, can be unconscious for days.
Yeah.
Imagine having people just... He's not responding, just put him in the ground.
Yeah. Job done.
I can only imagine how many were buried like that.
Yeah.
It's
sad to think
it's a scary thought. And then not only that, imagine you're that person.
Yeah.
You manage somehow to get out of your crypt or your grave.
And then you don't stand a chance.
Then you get attacked with whitethorn stakes and burnt alive.
Yeah.
Like, imagine
It's not great.
It's not great. You had no hope.
Once they've decided, that
that's
was it.
you.
Yeah, that's as good as it gets.
It's pretty frightening.
That's scary.
Yeah. So there you go. How's
Modern
that?
medicine. It's not terrible.
It's not terrible, guys. Let's embrace it. Information, education is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. It's pretty. You can see why it would have happened.
Yeah.
But how terrifyingly sad.
How extreme it got.
It would have been pretty bad. I also know that in some parts of Eastern Europe they would put a cage over the top of the grave
Oh.
so that the undead couldn't rise. It was that...
Much of a
It
thing.
was so strong in the culture and just the ideology. People truly believed it was a possibility.
That's crazy.
People lived in villages where it was something it was a factor that they're going to come out of their graves if we don't put sand or soil or put a cage over there.
Yep.
It's pretty frightening to think
That's
people
true.
lived like that.
Pretty frightening to live like that.
Yeah.
If you were back then.
Yeah. It is. I mean, do you ever? This is the thing. I mean, we've got other things to worry about nowadays, but just imagine it was very simple life.
Yeah.
And if you had very little education and you truly believed these things were real.
And education back then too was a thing for the rich and powerful as well. That
and mainly men too.
Yeah, it was completely restricted in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, scary times, man.
Very scary times. Now, I'm not picking on anyone who is into vampires. I think I fly the flag of, if you love it, do it.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel good, you should totally do it.
Yep.
No matter how weird or out there it is, if it gives you joy, it's something you should do. And just so you know, if there's people out there that believe in the beautiful, sort of polished Hollywood view of vampires, or the Lestat kind of where there's secret underground bars, if you're interested, jump online, because I did find there are lots of little groups who claim to be vampire covens and have little meetings and little places. Just be very careful though, guys. But there is plenty out there of little there's a subculture. There is a vampire subculture. There is one in Australia. If you're interested in it, look it up. It's very interesting. And yes, there's even a bar is it in Melbourne? No, I'm not talking about the theatre restaurant Dracula's. Not talking about that. There is a little hidden secret underground bar, like in Blade.
Yeah, right.
So have a little look. Jump online if you're interested in it. I know I love vampire shows.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, completely outrageous, but I mean, so is half of the stuff we talk about on this show. But vampires is one thing that I will come up straight up and say, nah, don't believe in them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, hopefully this evening my information has also helped lay that to rest. Or maybe not.
You've done really well. A lot of research and really good information.
Yeah, so if you have any vampire stories or just any interesting facts or tidbits that you've heard about vampires through the years, folklores or little stories that you've heard, let me know. And if you enjoyed this evening's episode, also let me know. I do apologise if it's a bit higgledy-piggledy. It's been a bit of a week again.
It's been a history lesson. It's been a good one.
It's been quite a historical one. Might have been a little bit boring. It wasn't your standard, this person woke up and there was, I didn't have many local stories.
That was good.
But this is interesting. I find this interesting and hopefully you do too. So, thanks for listening. This is Morgan.
And Jimmy.
Saying good night and stay creepy.
Creepy.
Bye.